Happy New Year, gardening friends. Budget Gardener here. It's a brand new year, brand new season. I've got a new gardening space, which you're looking at right now. I live in a tiny little apartment with very few windows. This particular space is very much shaded, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This year, I'm planning on doing a few things a little bit differently. I experimented last year with high def, and here we go. In season 6, we're going to try and do it all in high def. I'm also looking at trying to release reliably an episode every week. So hopefully there'll be 52 of them this year. But I'm also trying to shoot ahead of time, and here we are actually on the 3rd of January. So this first episode is already kind of delayed, which isn't good. But I'm going to try to give you an episode every week I'm going to try and teach you some of the things I've learned over the last 5 years. So that may mean that I end up doing clip shows or something like that. If I want to show you some experiment that I've done in the past, I want to try and share with you what I've learned over the last 5 years. So rather than repeat certain experiments, I'll probably go back to the original video. So that might not be in high def. I'm also going to try and give you a summary of what happened with the last few experiments from season 5. So here we go. I'm going to try and show you what I've got, what you're looking at right now, and how that's going to change immediately. This was part of me trying to figure out the garden plan, and that's one of the first things you need if you're going to garden, is a garden plan. So I'll show you the garden plan in a moment, and I'll start building this out. Here we go. Alright, so let's get down to what we're looking at here. As with any project that takes more than a few minutes, a plan is a good thing. I've given this little garden area a lot of thought, diagrammed the area, and thought a lot about the plants that will go there. The plan itself, right now we're not doing the whole thing. I'll show you the big picture here. This is the plan as I've developed it for the full area, but I think the first thing I need to realize is that I at least have a garden space. Season 5, I was pretty much in the kitchen, had a little space on the counter, trying to do some experiments, trying to continue with my gardening, and I finally decided, okay, I've been here long enough, let me go talk to the manager and see. There's a space across from my front door. It's been barren the whole time I've been here, and I just asked her if it was okay for me to put some plants out there, and she said yeah. It seemed like her response was more of she'd rather have some color there than to have nothing. And as with many apartment buildings, management, as opposed to ownership, and I don't want to blame the owner here. The owner seems to be a good owner. But having been a manager myself, I know that managers are usually requested to do quite a bit with very little money. So I think that she just doesn't have the budget to try and put something more comprehensive together. So if people want to plant in little spaces outside their apartments, that seems to be something that's okay. In fact, the reason I kind of figured it was time was because I noticed one of the other neighbors was trying to plant some stuff in an area that probably doesn't get a whole lot of sun, but at least they were trying, and they planted them directly into a little strip just outside their apartment. Here I've got a larger area than what they had, but I don't want to plant into the ground because I don't want to create a situation where something goes wrong and they've got to dig it all up, and the garden is lost at that point, because there's usually not enough time to try and carefully transplant plants out of the garden. If there's a reason why they need to dig it up, it's usually some sort of emergency. So in my case, I decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put down pavers, and with that I'll be able to just put potted plants on top of the pavers, which is pretty much what I've always done, is just potted plants. I've not had a plot that I own that I could go plant stuff into the ground. I also don't want to go completely crazy here and try and do a raised bed gardening kind of thing, because trying to move the raised beds should the need arise, that's more difficult. At least with the pavers and with pots, I could move the pots over to another location while they do whatever they got to do. I hope none of this ever happens, obviously, but I'm trying to prepare for what could be, a problem situation. So I have the area kind of mapped out in terms of where I think I can put stuff. I have to consider that there's a tree directly above, and there's not a whole lot of sun coming in. So it's a patch of dirt. I measured it out. I figured out how many pavers I could put down, and I laid them out in sort of a curve so it didn't seem completely squared off. I wanted to look a tad more natural, but obviously, being that, here somebody's making an effort to put together a garden. So while the main plan is a bit larger, until I acquire the pots and the soil, which I got rid of most of it when I shut down my old garden, it doesn't make sense to build out the stones all the way. So I've chosen a subset of just 9 stones, and I had one left over, which I'll get to later. It was ultimately, it didn't kind of fit the plan in terms of color. I thought it was a sandstone color. It turned out to be like a darker brown. So that one's just kind of moved out of the way, and it may just go away altogether. But until I have everything that I need to fill everything out, it makes more sense to just put down a few stones, maybe about half of it, and then get the pots together and put them on top, because I don't want to leave it looking like a patio for too long. I want to actually get the plants in there. So the garden is in near full shade. I need to do a little bit of sun tracking, which is something I've learned before, just to try and understand how much sun the garden's actually getting, because you don't want to try and put plants that require 8 hours of direct sunlight in an area that doesn't get any direct sunlight. You want to find plants that are shade tolerant. The sun tracking basically allows me to figure out, even though theoretically I'm not going to get any direct sun, there might be some reflection off a side of the building or something like that, which is not direct sun, it's the reflected sun, but I just want to do the sun tracking. And basically all that is taking pictures. The way I do it is I just take a picture of the area every hour on the hour, the best I can. Even if it takes me a few days to get each of those hours together, then I can see where the sun is at each point in the day and see roughly how much sun each part of the garden is going to get. According to the official solar calculations, here in Los Angeles, everything is, the sun's going to hang out to the south. It's not going to be directly overhead. And this particular building, the way it's set up in that garden spot, the garden spot is to the north of the building with it's a south building with the north facing wall, if that makes any sense. So basically the building is blocking the sun. That's why I'm not getting direct sunlight. I've already done a little bit of the sun tracking, and I'll continue and I'll show you, what pictures I have as I go. The sun, as far as I can tell, or the direct sun, is at least a good 10, maybe upwards of 20 feet away from the north end of the garden, and maybe another 10 from the building. So if you just kind of think about it, the sun comes down at an angle. So the front yard, the courtyard, is getting some sun, but the garden will not. With all of that in mind, I also need to carefully pick my plants. I have a couple of criteria there. I want shade-tolerant plants because they're not going to get sun, but also this is a pet-friendly building, and I don't want, even though I don't expect there to be a problem, I just don't want to be the cause of trouble. So I'm trying to pick plants that are cat and dog safe. ASPCA has on their website a good reference for what plants are toxic and which ones aren't to cats, dogs, and horses. And really, I don't expect horses to be coming through here because this is actually a gated complex. It would be kind of hard for them to get in, and the hallways would be a little too narrow and too short for them to get through comfortably. Um, so I really am disregarding the horses. Not that I don't care about horses. What else? There's a. I already mentioned that there's a tree directly above. So I'm trying to pick plants that are shade tolerant and pet friendly, and I've focused in on a couple of plants. One of them is coleus, which is a plant I've worked with before, and maybe you didn't understand fully in the past, but I had a chance this past year, or actually as I was moving out of my old location, I had some coleus plants that were okay but struggling a little. And interestingly enough, they were in the shadier parts of the old apartment building where I'd planted out a lot of stuff. And as I was moving, it's like I can't really leave these here because then that becomes a burden to whoever takes over as manager. So I pulled it. They were potted, so I picked them up and I gave them to my parents, and they had a spot in their front yard that was shaded, and they kept trying to grow bushes, and the bushes just wouldn't grow. I gave them the coleus plants. They put them in there, and a couple of months later they were thriving. So since then, they've actually the plants kind of got a little spindly, so they pulled them and put in new coleus plants. But it turned out to be a happy sort of accident or condition that the coleus worked for them. So it gives me confidence to try and grow them again. Um, and coleus, if you're not familiar with it, I mean, you can look it up. But coleus is basically, um, it's just basically leaves. It does if it tries to go to seed, there are little stalks that come out the top with tiny little white flowers on it. If you just pinch those off, it puts the energy back in the leaves. And the leaves vary from green to red. They have this interesting sort of mix. So it gives color. It's not just green leaves. The other plant is marigold. And that one is like some people call it a miracle plant. A lot of people call it the gardener's friend. It's easy to grow. It's somewhat shade tolerant, and it's actually edible for humans, and cats and dogs don't have a problem with it. So I'm going to work with those two, and I've got in the center, I'm going to put my attempt at growing a purple orchid tree. It's been kind of sitting in the corner there, so it's survived for the last few months without just dying off. So it's getting enough sun to survive. But it was damaged at one point, so I'm going to put it in the center so it's protected because it'll be harder to reach with all the other plants. So, if a cat or a dog decides to kind of roam around, there's less chance they're going to knock it over. That's pretty much it. That's the overall plan and the smaller plan that I'm starting with. So, next episode looks like what I'm going to be doing is potting everything. I've got the seeds already. I'm going to get those planted, and then I'm going to lay them all out. And I'm also going to show you how I laid out all of the stones. That really doesn't take a whole lot of time to show you. I tried to make them space them out evenly so it looks nice and neat, and I have a little trick for that. So that's what we have to look forward to next episode. So this is the Budget Gardener signing off and saying, may your thumb be green.